Howdy, folks. Gather round. Let me tell you a story about a Christmas. Christmas a long time ago. Our story begins with a feller named Eben. Now, Eben, he were the richest man in the territories. Why, he were so rich, he not only owned the largest ranch, he owned nigh most the town of Humbug. He owned the bank, the general store, the hotel, the saloon, just about everything. Now, you'd think, being as all-fired rich and powerful as Mr. Eben was, you'd think he'd be one mighty happy fella, right? But no, Mr. Eben wasn't happy. Mr. Eben was miserly. He was a miser in a skinflint. All he cared about was money. And while there ain't nothing wrong with having a lot of money, when money is all you care about, you ain't never going to have enough, and you ain't never going to be happy. And that's the way it was with Mr. Eben. Now, Mr. Eben was so tight-fisted that he didn't even own a house. He just kept a room at the hotel because it were cheaper that way and saved him more money. He ate his dinners at the saloon. And we find him this night finishing up with his beef stew at the saloon and heading up to his room. It's Christmas Eve, like I said long time ago. And he's feeling a mite funny, kind of wondering if maybe something wasn't right with his beef stew as he's heading up to his room. And he gets to his room, he pulls out his key to unlock the door and sticks the key in the lock, starts to reach for the handle and freezes and just stares, because, well, looking back at him, ain't no normal door handle like's normally there. It's a face, and it's a face that looks almighty familiar, but it can't be. He blinks, he shakes his head, and looks back, and lo and behold, it's a normal door handle again. Knew I was feeling funny, he says to himself. And must have been some bad beef in that stew. I'm going to have to have some words with that there cook. And he goes into his room, shuts the door behind him, walks over to the nearest lamp and lifts the wick, strikes a match, lights the wick, and as he lowers the chimney on the lamp, he steps back in horror, because lo and behold, why, there's that face staring back at him. Old scraggly beard and kind of a floppy hat, and definitely a face he recognizes. Oh, Lord Almighty, it's a face. He blows that out real quick like he don't want to see that face. And strangest thing, though, when he blows out that lamp, the room don't go dark. No, siree, there's a glow. And the glow's coming from behind him. Slowly, Eben turns around to see what's back there. And oh, Lord, his heart starts beating like to beat itself out of his chest. Because standing there is his old partner, Jake. Now, Jake's been dead for nigh on 7, 8 years now. And that ain't the strangest part about it. No, sir. See, Jake, he's all bent and bowed over, and he's got this big, heavy saddle strapped to his back, and he's got saddlebags hanging off of it with ropes and bags of gold, and they all dragging on the ground behind him. And he can't even hardly stand up from the weight of it. And Eben can see the saddlebags, they all stuffed with gold nuggets and with bills of sale and with foreclosure notices and just all kinds of rigmarole. Now, Eben reaches up and he kind of rubs his stomach and he says, I know you ain't there. You can't be there because you've been dead a real long time, so I must have had some bad beef. I'm going to fire that cook. And then the phantasm there in front of him, why, it speaks. And it speaks with Jake's voice. Now, it's a kind of holler-sounding voice, like that there ain't no true lungs producing it, but it's clearly Jake's voice, and it says, Evan, I ain't no figment of your imagination. I ain't no bad beef stew. I'm the spirit of your old partner, Jacob Marley, and I am cursed to walk this earth wearing the saddle that I created for myself. And Ebony says, "What? Now that don't make no sense. Why you gotta wear that saddle? You ain't done nobody no harm. You ain't never stole from nobody. So you made a lot of money. So what? Ain't nothing wrong with that." And Jacob speaks up and he says, Evan, I may not have done nobody no harm, but I ain't never done nobody no good. And what you gotta understand is that you cannot refuse to do good and avoid doing harm. Every time you is presented with an opportunity to do good and you don't do good, you do harm. And every time you do harm, you add another nugget, another stitch, another bill of sale to your saddlebag. Now, you've had 7 years to work on your saddlebag, and your saddlebag was as large as mine when I died. You put a lot of work into that saddlebag, and yours is nigh on twice as large as mine. You ain't gonna be able to do more but crawl under the weight of your saddle. Now, I got permission to come and help you, and you need to listen to me, because if you don't mend your ways, you are gonna hate eternity when you are dead. Now, old Evan, he might have feared here, and he said, well, Jake, you was my friend. You was my only friend. Surely you can help me out of this fix. Tell me what to do, and I'll fix it. Just let me know. Jacob says, Evan, I can't tell you what to do. You have to figure it for yourself. But I can help you. Tonight, you is going to be visited by 3 spirits. The first one is going to be here at the stroke of 1. And you listen to these spirits. You pay almighty close attention. This is the only chance you is going to be given. Evan starts to say, well, thank you. Thank you, Jake. I will. But before he can finish, the light around Jake dims and goes out. And he's left in darkness. And he's standing there wondering, well, did that really just happen? I don't believe in spirits. No, I surely don't. I still think it's some bad beef stew. So he relights that lamp, and as he turns around to grab his nightshirt and get ready for bed, he notices something glitting on the floor, right about where Jacob was standing. And he goes over, and he picks it up. And you know what it was? It was a golden nugget. And as he held that golden nugget, he thought about all them bags hanging off that saddle, stuffed to the brim with golden nuggets. And he got mighty afeared right then. Almighty afeared. Why, he was so afeared, he didn't bother to change into his nightshirt. He just laid down on top of his bed, fully clothed with his boots on. And he laid there and he tried to fall asleep, but he couldn't do it. His heart was racing too fast. His mind was going a million different directions, thinking over his life, thinking about what Jacob could possibly have meant. And then he heard it. He heard the clock strike 1 a.m. And he held his breath. And he looked for the glow. He figured there's got to be a glow. There was a glow with Jacob. There'll be a glow now. There weren't no glow, though. But then he heard it. Crick, 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 crick. Coming from the corner. Now, earlier he'd done blowing out the lamp, so he quickly relit the lamp, and And he looks over into the corner and, wow, what does he see? But the fanciest duded up dandy he done ever seen in his life, sitting in his rocking chair, cricking back and forth, crick, crick, crick. And this young feller grins up at him and says, "Howdy, Eben, how you doing?" And Eben thinks to himself, well, I ain't got to be afraid of this guy. This dude's a dandy. You should see him. He's got on a red bowler hat with a white, whatever you call it, around the inside of the brim. He's got a red and white check kerchief. He's got a red shirt with white snowflakes stitched into it. He's wearing red chaps with silver buckles in the shape of snowflakes. Oh, Lordy. Oh, his boots are red with white snowflakes stitched into them. Eben ain't never seen the like. Talk about your fancy dandy. Well, the spirit laughs and says, "Eben, is you ready for a journey?" And Eben says, "Well, I don't know. Where are we going?" And the spirit speaks up and says, "I am the spirit of Christmas past. We are going to go visit some of your past Christmases." And Eben thinks to himself, well, they shouldn't be too bad. All right, let's go. And bam, just like that, they're in a barn. And it's all decorated up for Christmas, and there's a huge shindig going on. There's violins, and there's square dancing, and there's apple bobbing, and there's cider and presents under the tree. And Eben grins, and he says, "Why, this is one of Fezziwig's parties. Fezziwig, I worked for him for a stretch before I, took his ranch away from him, but, he couldn't pay his bills, so I had to take his ranch. But, oh, man, did he ever throw Christmas parties. I loved his Christmas parties." And then he gets this kind of a funny look on his face, and the spirit says, "Eben, is you okay?" And Eben says, "I was just remembering how I treated my foreman earlier. You see, my foreman done built himself a shack up where we used to have a line cabin that no longer in use. He kind of turned the line cabin into a shack, and he moved his family into it, and he didn't ask my permission, and I ordered him to tear it down. Ordered him to tear it down on Christmas Day." Huh. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, you think? Spirit laughs. And just like that, they're gone again. And Eben's immediately like, oh, Spirit, I don't want to see this Christmas, Spirit, please. I have tried so hard to forget about this Christmas. Please, Spirit. Spirit says, well, it's your Christmas. It's your past. Can't change it. You might as well learn from it. And Eben watched as a younger Eben handed the young schoolmarm a present. And she opened the present, and there were a ring in the present. And he watched himself ask the young lady to marry him. And then he watched as the young lady got this real sad look on her face and said, Eben, I can't marry you. You don't love me. You love your mistress. And that ain't me. And he watched as the young him said, well, I ain't got no mistress. What you talking about? You're the only woman in my life. I don't even know any other women. I ain't got no mistress. And the young schoolmarm looked at him and said, Eben, your mistress ain't a woman. If your mistress was a woman, I could fight against a woman. And might be I could win. But I can't fight against your mistress. Your mistress ain't a woman. Your mistress is money. and power. And you will always love money and power. And as long as you love money and power, there will never be room for you to love me. I can't marry you. And as Eben watched, the younger him reached out, took the ring out of the young lady's hand, stood up and started to leave. And he hollered at himself, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Sit down. You're gonna be lonely for the rest of your life. Do you want to be lonely for the rest of your life? Sit down. Tell her you'll give up the money. Tell her you'll give up the power if only she'll marry you. You're blowing it, you moron!" But of course, the younger him couldn't hear him. And the younger him just sauntered on out the door to go home and count his money. Oh, Spirit. I don't want to see. No, can't you take me back? But the Spirit didn't take him back. The Spirit took him to several other of his past Christmases. And they was all sad affairs. Eben hadn't realized it, but he'd never had a happy Christmas since the moment he quit working for Fezziwig. And when he finally had enough, he cried, "Spirit, please have mercy on me. Take me home. I can't take no more. I don't know what I'm supposed to learn. Other than I hate Christmas." Just like that, he was back in the room. And as Eben watched, why, the Spirit started to change. His belly grew fat. His bowler cap turned into a sombrero, a red sombrero patterned with snowflakes with silver bells dangling off of it. A big red duster with white trimming appeared on him. And like I said, he got fat, and he got a big, bushy white beard. His hair all turned white. Eben didn't know what to make of that. "You all right there, Spirit?" "Eben, you didn't like the past. So how's about I become the Spirit of Christmas present? Let's go visit some of your present Christmases. You ready?" Eben said, "No, Spirit, I don't think I..." Didn't matter. Just like that, they was gone. And they was in that shack that he'd done ordered his foreman to tear down. And he watched as his foreman came through the door with a young'un on his shoulders, and immediately 4 or 5 other young'uns came crowding around. Daddy's home, we can have dinner now." And the foreman looked over at his wife and said, "Howdy, Betty Lou, how you doing? Christmas dinner ready?" And Betty Lou smiled at him and said, Why, sure is, Bob. How'd it go with Mr. Eben? Everything all right?" Bob smiled and said, "Oh, don't worry about that, Mr. Eben. He's a good soul." To which Betty Lou kind of gave a derisive snort like, "Yeah, right, whatever." And Bob gave her this look and said, "Now, Betty Lou, it's Christmas. It's Christmas Eve, but it's Christmas. Let's worry about it later. Let's just enjoy dinner tonight." And he took the young'un over and set the young'un in a chair and kind of propped him up. And Eben noticed that the young'un wasn't looking all that very healthy. And the Spirit, Eben asked the Spirit, "But what's wrong with the young'un?" And the Spirit said, "Well, don't you remember? Don't you remember what Bob done told you?" And as Eben thought back, why, he remembered that Bob had mentioned that he had a sick young'un, and he couldn't afford to get the young'un cured or fixed up, and well, it was only a matter of money, and Eben had plenty of money, and Eben could have helped the youngster, but Eben had told Bob that if Bob couldn't support his family and take care of his family on what he were paid, then it wasn't nothing to do with Mr. Eben. somewhere in the back of Mr. Evans' mind, a gear fell into place, and he started to understand where this was going. And he said, Spirit, I think I'm starting to, can we go now? Surely. Just like that, they was gone. And they was at his nephew's house. And his nephew was throwing a great big huge party. And there was people laughing and dancing and joking. And someone asked him, is your uncle going to show up? And his nephew said, no, I done invited my uncle. But he threw me out on my ear. Said he hates Christmas and he ain't likely to show up. So I done decided, since we can't have him here in body, we will have him here in spirit. And with that, he pointed over towards the wall, where there were a drawing of a donkey with Mr. Evans' face on it. And everybody laughed and roared and thought it was hilarious. Except for Mr. Evans, who was kind of embarrassed and humiliated. And he looked up at the Spirit and he said, Spirit, is that what people think of me? Well, of course that's what people think of you. What do you think? They're going to be proud of you because you take all their money? Well, I always thought of myself as a good man. And the Spirit laughed and said, how can you be a good man when you ain't never done no good in this world? Can we go, Spirit? Why, just like that, they was standing outside the widow McIntosh's house. And the parson was there. And the parson had a box with food and coats and shoes. And the widow McIntyre was at the door. And she had all these young'uns gathered around. And as Eben looked into their faces, why, he could see they was all pinched up with hunger and blue with cold. And he looked at the shack, and the shack were all run down with chinks between the logs where the wind were blowing through. And the widow McIntosh, she was of course thrilled to see the parson, but that were it. That were the point where the gear clicked, and Eben, he were overcome with shame as he remembered that the parson had come to him. The parson had come to him and given him an opportunity to do good. The parson had come and asked him to donate to the Widow and Orphans Fund. And he was so filled with shame. He was so filled with shame as he remembered what he done told that parson. He done told that parson if the widows and the orphans couldn't take care of themselves, it weren't none of his doing. And he done thrown that parson out on his ear. And as he'd thrown him out, he done told him, Parson, I ain't never crossed your doorstep. Don't you never cross mine again. He was so filled with shame and remorse. And he got it now. He'd had a chance to do good. The parson hadn't been trying to take something from him when the parson had come and asked him to donate to the Widows and Orphans Fund. The parson had been giving him a gift. The opportunity to do good in this world. And he done thrown that gift back in the parson's face and thrown the parson out the door. And by refusing to do good, he had done great harm. And he understood now. Oh, Lord, he understood. And he said, Spirit, I get it. I understand. I know what I need to do. You can take me home now. Spirit, he laughed and he said, no, Christmas ain't over yet. And that Spirit took him all over the world. That Spirit showed him all kinds of Christmases. He showed him Christmases with royalty. He showed him Christmases with paupers and peasants and everything in between. And when he finally returned Eben to his room, Eben understood that there was a world out there that was bigger than him. But he could still make a difference in this world if he did good where he lived in his community. And as he looked up and started to thank the Spirit of Christmas present, he stopped. And his heart started beating fast again, and he started getting almighty scared because that Spirit was changing. His boots, his pants, his shirt, all turned pitch black. His hat turned into a 10-gallon Stetson, black as night. That duster turned black as night, and all the fur fell away from it. His beard and hair fell out and gathered on the ground around him like snow. And his cheeks started to sink back into his face. His eyes sunk back into his sockets. And a pair of 6-shooters, black as night, appeared on his hips. And all of a sudden, Evan found himself staring at the scariest looking gunfighter he'd done ever seen. Looked like nothing more than a skeleton dressed all in black. And he said, oh, Spirit, I fear you, Almighty, and I don't fear you because of how you look. I fear you because of what you have to show me. I've seen Christmas past. I've seen Christmas present. All I can assume is you are the Spirit of Christmas present, or Christmas future. I don't know if I'm ready for this. And the skull just grinned at him. Just like that. They was standing on a street corner. And there were 3 fellas laughing and joking, and he overheard one of them say, this is the best Christmas I done ever had. I ain't never had a better Christmas than this one. Can't believe he's dead. Hopefully, whoever takes his place will be a whole lot easier to deal with and won't keep jacking up my rent, trying to put me out of business. And they all laughed, and he heard one of them say, anybody go to the funeral? Nah, I didn't know. Even his nephew didn't go to the funeral. Why would anyone go to that miserly old skinflint's funeral? And Eben looked up at the Spirit, and he said, Spirit, who are they talking about? Who is this poor man who done died all alone, and nobody even went to his funeral, and they're all happy that he's dead? And the Spirit pointed behind him. And as Eben turned around, he realized that they were no longer on that street corner. They was in a graveyard. And the Spirit was pointing at one gravestone in particular. Now, the graveyard had been well maintained. All the stones were well taken care of. A few of them even had flowers on them. Except for this one grave marker. It were all run down and covered with weeds and vines, and it had nobody visited it, had nobody cared for it. And with fear and trepidation, Eben slowly shambled over to that stone, and as he pulled away the vines and the shrubs so that he could see the name, he knew what he was going to see, but he had to see it anyhow, and sure enough, there it was. Ebenezer Scrooge. And he turned around and said, Spirit, I can change. I figured out. I know I need to change. I can change. Please, tell me there's time. Tell me it's not over. Tell me it's not too late. Please, Spirit. And all of a sudden he was falling. He was falling through pitch blackness, and he was thrashing and screaming and hollering for help. Spirit, help me. Spirit, help me. And he woke up, and he were back in his bed. And the sun was just starting to peek through the shades, and he were all tangled up in his bed sheets and his linens, and he untangled himself, and he jumped out of bed, and I'm alive, oh, is there time? And we went all over the place. How much time did that take? And he ran to the window, and he lifted the shade, and he tore open the window, and he threw open the shutters, and he looked out, and he looked around, and there was still snow on the ground. That's a good sign, number one, still snow on the ground. And he saw the butcher's boy coming out of the butcher shop to sweep the walk, and he holled, "Boy! Boy!" And then the boy looked up at him. The boy was almighty feared, because this was Mr. Evan, and everybody knows Mr. Evan is just mean as sin. "Sir, Mr. Evan, sir, what day is it, boy? What day is it?" It's Christmas morning, sir." Ha! Ha! They did it. The spirits done it. They done it all in one night. "Boy, tell your papa to meet me in the shop. I know it's Christmas morning. I'm sorry to disturb his Christmas, but tell him to meet me in the shop." And he tore downstairs, and he went into the butcher shop, and he ordered goose and ham and chickens and a side of beef. Some of it he had delivered to his nephew. Some of it he had delivered to his foreman. Some of it he had delivered to his ranch hands. A lot of it he had delivered to the parson for the widows and the orphans. He ran over to his general store, hollering along the way for a couple of the boys playing, "Come on, come, 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 come." And he got into the store, and he paid them all to run presents all over the place. He was picking stuff. "Oh, take this to my nephew. Oh, take this to the widow. Take that." And he was just having the time of his life. By the time he was done, half his stock was gone, passed out to the entire town. He'd even hired a buckboard to go deliver presents to his foreman and his family. That day, he showed up at his nephew's, and he were the life of the party. Totally surprised his nephew and everybody else. They couldn't believe that this were the same Ebenezer Scrooge who hated Christmas. But the day after Christmas, oh, that were the best day of all for him. He hitched up his horse to his sled, and he drove out to that shack that Bob had built for his family. And as he topped the rise and he saw the shack down below, he put a grumpy, grouchy look on his face. Pulled up to the outside and hollered, "Bob! Bob, get out here, Bob!" And Bob kind of hesitantly came to the door and said, Mr. Evans, sir, I done told you to tear this shack down. It ain't right your family living in this shack." Bob said, "Well, Mr. Eben, it were Christmas. I promise I'll get to it right away, Mr. Eben. I'm sorry, but it were Christmas." That don't matter. Don't matter. It ain't right your family living in this shack. Can't abide by that. I'm sorry, I just can't abide by that. You ought to take your family, load them into this sleigh. We're going to take them into town, and we're going to put them up in the hotel. Don't worry, I'm paying for it. It ain't going to cost you nothing. But we're going to put them up in the hotel. And then we're going to build you a ranch house. Because my foreman, he needs a ranch house. Yes, he does. And I know just the place to put it. There's a plot of land right by the barn, sitting on the creek, and it's